Hello and welcome to Real Hi-Fi Help. Let's find out why most speakers are so bad. I think that it has mostly to do with what makes them good, and that probably strikes you a bit me saying that, but I think it's because a lot of speakers have these exotic driver units, just like beryllium tweeters like this one, or ecotone ceramic units, or a RAL ribbon tweeter. So, I mean, they all do a lot of good, revealing new levels of detail, but a problem exists when this is the best thing about the speaker, driving the whole marketing. And trust me, that is often the only good thing about a speaker at certain low price levels. So I think that there's a general problem where the cabinet on a lot of low models, especially, which is like the main part of the market that sells, that they're not sturdy enough, they're not big enough, and sometimes, some few times, they're actually too stiff, they're too heavy, they're too rigid, just like the Wilson audio speakers. And you know, on top of that, when the cabinet is often not big enough to support the sound, prioritizing looks instead of sound, again, to sell more. And when you just get too many different types of units in a speaker that actually becomes too good for its own self, it just dominates too much in the sound. So it's a funny thing, it's the thing that makes it good, but in a way also makes it bad. So having really good units in a speaker is a blessing and a curse at the same time, because for it to be more of a blessing, showing off its good side, you usually have to invest a lot more time on the pairing of the units so they fully integrate and not dominate too much, or kind of go into a certain type of direction. And it just takes a lot of money to do that. And what us normal users can't see is that the process of the pairing and the tuning often costs a lot of money for that company, usually going into the millions of dollars. So I think that's like a really good point to why so many speakers are so bad. It's their tuning method that actually varies a lot from manufacturer to manufacturer, and some companies also don't really have a really good system of filtering out the bad units, so they'll just use almost like any units, and because they have a very what's it called, low level of acceptance factor, where they just will basically take anything and then just like pair it within a certain low standard. So I think that those are things that you know are very important to master in order to get a really, really good sound. So I think that the thing that makes most times a speaker really good is the filtering, the crossover. And it's just doing it in a way so there's a really high standard of parts in it that is way above average. And a lot of companies don't say this, but that you're able to reduce the signal path means so much. There are a lot of big speakers out there that just, they have a couple of parts extra than they really should have, and because they really want to filter out the sound and create a good structure. But the problem is that many times prioritizes structure instead of, going deeper into the sound, so you get more pieces of information, but you're not going as deep into the sound. So I think that's an important thing for most people to remember. And, it doesn't take a lot to destroy a speaker, especially when we're going up in class and we're starting to reveal a lot of more detail. We're opening up for a lot of good things that can happen, potentially happen, but also for a lot of bad things that also can happen. And it's when you start putting things like this in a speaker that just makes it horrible. And I think that we are still living in an age where speaker terminals are not given the priority that they kind of need. I remember hearing a lot of speaker terminals exchanged on the same speaker, and what I noticed was that the basic copper terminals in general just had a very basic sound that was very flat, dull, boring, non-reactive, but also that the newer standard of using copper as a base metal together with like a surface rhodium plating or gold plating on it also just seemed on the surface to make the sound slightly better, but you could still hear that it was traveling, the detail was traveling on the surface, which kind of gave you an illusion of the sound being better, but still not quite, And I feel that we've neglected this part of the sound, that there aren't, when you look at really good speakers, then there's a reason for why you most of the time only get really good speakers at a certain price class. And that's because at a certain price class they start using some proper terminals. And I think this is a really neglected part of our speaker design, where I think that we need to kind of figure out how to get pure silver terminals, because when we do that, when we get into a high percentage of pure silver, something kind of magical happens where everything gets more real, more musical, more down to earth, and it has a longer lasting, original, and more sincere type of sound. And I think that some people won't like that, because we've gotten used to a sound that is very much like, it's very much like a fireworks display, where it's there to impress you, and knock your socks off and give it that leading edge, and then cutting through it and feeling that multi-layered movement. I think we've gotten used to that, to a way where it's actually, what can you say, it's distracting a bit. We're not getting into the real meaty type of good sound. And I've heard it before. And yeah, it does cost a lot to get some pure silver terminals. I mean, buying some cheap terminals, you can do that for a couple of bucks. But if you had to custom make your own silver terminals, and you went to your local guy and did that, he would most likely charge you a couple of hundred most likely charge you a couple of hundred bucks for that. More like 500 or $1,000 for doing that. That's a lot of money, that's a lot of money, and that's why a lot of people don't do it. And I think that it's kind of an underrated thing, and I haven't really included this in the whole video. Now that I think about it, just generally having these really high quality pure silver parts, I remember hearing it on Dulund and some other manufacturers there. As soon as you got those silver parts into the crossover, into the cable, into the speaker terminals, into like voice coils and stuff like that, my God, it just became so much more magical and sophisticatedly warm, instead of this do-it-yourself kind of raw two-dimensional sound. So a lot of people haven't heard this yet. They're still listening to the stuff that we have in stores, because that's the stuff that you buy. And you start getting into this, sniffing to this sound when you get up to, I would say, we're really only there when we're into the audio note SEC signature, I think it's called, then we're starting to get into these like silver voice coil types of situations where we got silver terminals, silver cables, just almost everything is silver at that point. Not quite there yet. I think you still have to go up to like Sogon before that happens. But at that point, you just realize that what we're doing with speakers at a normal level is just almost a waste of time, because it's just pumping a lot of random sounds out. It's not giving you the true meaty, deep, organic, real sound. And a lot of people won't ever get to hear this. You know, they'll look at something like a normal Focal speaker or Sonos Faber speaker, or like a really rare speaker like B&W D3800, and then they'll think that that's the end destination. That doesn't get really better than that. But trust me, it gets a lot better than that. That doesn't even get close to anything that's at the top, those speakers. And I like to, I still think that the B&W D3800 model, it is still a very good speaker for the money, and it will fit a lot of transistor gear. But getting into that like audio note type of sound, it's still light years away from that. Light years, you know. That B&W speaker will beat most speakers on the market. A lot like the Monitor Audio PL300 speaker. That will also beat a lot of speakers on the market. But that is a speaker where you have to have a lot of, you really have to test it a lot and do a good pairing in order to get as deep as the B&W speaker that I mentioned. The B&W speaker is a lot more easy to work with. But again, you know, it's funny. Just think about it. It's funny how there's a speaker like Martin Design Bird 1, which is basically one of the best modern speakers ever. And when you think about it, just think about, I think it's at least 90% of what's on the market. It doesn't even come close to that. It's truly horrifying in a way. I think that when they made the Martin Bird 1 speakers, that they made not just a good speaker, but like a piece of art. Yeah, it's so far away from the audio note sound that, of course, the audio note top speakers are like a hell of a lot better. But still, if you want a modern speaker with a lot of detail that does almost everything at an extreme top level, you just get so much value for your money with that Martin Bird 1 speaker. I mean, it's like $8,000 used nowadays, you know? You probably can't get them anymore because I've been raving so much about them on my channel. And the newer Bird too, I mean, it's a good speaker, a lot better than most normal speakers, but it just doesn't have that magical top end, you know, that diamond treble, that really fantastically vulgar and delicious sound that's really edgy, and it's got no tonality laid on the sound, no added warmness. It's just the Bird 2's just they're just not quite there, you know. I still think you have to go over to the Martin Design Coltrane, the new one, before you start getting into that sound of the Bird 1s. You know, of course it's a bit more with the Coltrane because they're also a lot more expensive. You know, you get more low end, you get more punch, you get more pressure. But yeah, that level of sound, you know. But that's also like it's like a mid-sized family car, you know. It's like a lower model Mercedes, probably like a C-Class Mercedes or something like that. It is amazing that you have to pay so much money for a speaker that is really good, you know, that has almost everything. I would say that the Martin Design Coltrane if I had to pick one speaker that had everything that an audio note speaker that was like closest to the audio note speaker, but more in the modern direction, then I would take the Martin design Coltrane instead of the Bird ones. But it's also like, what is that? I don't know. Is that like 80,000 euros? Oh, I'm not sure. That's a lot of money, but that's usually what it takes. It's difficult to say to a lot of people, and I think a lot of people will kind of hate me for saying that, but that's kind of the price class I think that you generally have to be in. The I think the 50 to 100,000 euro, 50 to 100,000 euro. I think that's like generally the price range that you have to be in order to get a speaker that is very good all-round speaker at a high level, that is consistent. That you generally have to do that, and still a lot of companies at this level can't figure out how to do it. I think that it's a lot more likely that they will make a really good sound. Even companies like Daily and Audio Victor, once you get into their top models, they actually start sounding okay. But it's a funny thing, isn't it? That you have to pay so much money in general. I also think with Verity speakers, I really like their speakers, but I just think that price wise, it's just like, are you kidding me? Do I have to pay $50,000 just to start on the good sound? That's kind of annoying. It's kind of annoying. Of course, it gets cheaper when you live in Canada. I think also probably because the Canadians don't have as much money, so that kind of takes care of that. Softens out the whole imbalance. But yeah, it's tough, man. It's really tough. I think you just generally have to consider that having a really good top speaker is around $50,000 plus. And once in a while something comes along. Once in a while, very seldom, like the speaker that I have now. Took me forever to get the Audio Note E, SPEHE. That was like, how much did that cost? I think normal price was around $10,000, but you never see a speaker like that in that price range. Never. I haven't seen one yet. I've tried most speakers on the market, and it just, even stuff like ATC, which is pretty good for the price, and Tannoy also pretty good for the price. Don't get anywhere near that with the integration and the clarity and that ultra reactive sound that doesn't boost the sound. I mean, it doesn't get anywhere near that, and Tannoy, they make some pretty decent speakers, and also ATC. When you take the top models that they have, I mean, they're pretty damn good. They beat a lot of stuff on the market. But I mean, if you take the top models that they have, they can't even beat the 8th model from the top that I have for $10,000. And I think that the Tannoys and the ATC, this is just me guessing, I think they're in the area of $100,000 plus. You can correct me on that in the comments. I'm just farting up some numbers that I remember from the past. I could be wrong, but it's just price wise. It just can't compete. And I think it's funny. It's funny because the critics of Audio Note, they're going like, oh yeah, silver wire, silver this and that, doesn't make a difference. It's the same design from Snell. No, it isn't. It's so far away from the original design of Snell that it's just light years better. And if you take the price difference from around the 80s and then compare it to the Audio Notes E series, now that we have the top E series, which has like 18 models, then you'll notice that if you just convert, if you compensate for inflation, you'll actually realize that you're getting a lot more for your money now compared to back then, even though back then you only paid like, I don't know, $2,000 for a set of Snell speakers. So it's funny. It's funny with speakers, because in a way that they have gotten a hell of a lot better throughout the years, without a doubt. But at the same time, we're kind of neglecting the sincerity of the real sound, the substance, the meatiness of it. And we're forgetting small things like integration, balance, being able to play every single part of music genre that exists, not just catering to people who want to listen to hi-fi tracks or Diana Krall or Katie Malua or Hugh Masekela or Dire Straits, I mean, those things sound good on basically all speakers, but a speaker that can fully reveal detail, but also at the same time is very pleasant, very organic, and you can just keep on digging and digging and digging, and you'll never hit a wall. That's what I discovered with my speaker. When I didn't just buy this thing overnight. I heard it like 50 different places before I bought my speaker, and I heard the amounts of gears that speaker has, and I just realized price-wise, nothing comes close to this sound. And actually, it's actually a lot better than a lot of the speakers that I've heard that are in the $500,000 to a couple of million bucks price class. I mean, don't get me wrong. Those big speakers can fill up a bigger room than my speaker. So in a way, they are better in some few ways, but it's still irrelevant, because those big speakers, many times they just don't have the true intimacy. They can't convey music without dissecting it and making it ugly and prioritizing effect. They'll constantly go into this like hi-fi mode where they're just trying to impress you, and it just becomes gray, vulgar, almost decadent in a way with a lot of these expensive speakers. And yeah, don't get me wrong, you can still get good value speakers like the Fender Steen 1CI and the 2CE and the JBL L100 Classic. Those are also extremely good speakers for the price. And also like Audio Solutions Figaro XXL. I remember asking my friends, my friend about that, and he said that was a really good speaker. And it took me a while before I could listen to, I think it was 2 pairs that were used. And yeah, those are also really like fantastically good value speakers. So, I mean, if you want something that's good value, but still not at the top level, those are really good speakers that most people should try. And also the DTQWT do-it-yourself project, you can make that yourself for like $2,000 or $3,000, and it probably will take you like 3 or 6 months to make that, and also fantastic value. But again, we're not getting anywhere close to the top sound as with the speaker that I currently have. And I feel that is because of these things that I've mentioned here, that it's doing what nobody else is doing, instead of going the marketing route and showing us these shiny cabinets with this shiny new membrane technology and ribbon tweeters and stuff like that. We're getting over to a sound that is just too much of a surface detail, where it's too plingy. It's a bit like since around 1997, when we started inventing autotune, and we focused on highlighting certain parts of the frequency in our studio recordings. I've seen that several times. There's a channel called Streaky, Streaky. Then you can see what he does in order to produce tracks for his clients, so they can release it onto the market. And the stuff that they do there, it sounds like most people are doing that with their music nowadays. And also, it's kind of going from the music to our sound systems, where they're just producing a lot of products, not things that are sustainable, that you will want to listen to for many, many, many years. I mean, if you want something that starts becoming sustainable, I suggest that you get something like a really good Tannoy speaker or a Harbeth speaker, or then you're starting to get into a sustainable form of speaker sound that is going to last you for many years. But there aren't many speakers like that. There aren't many speaker companies like Peak Consult, Martin Design, Verity, and even Karma speakers. Karma speakers have a very confrontational sound, so they're not for a lot of people. But again, then we're also into price classes that are usually starting at around $50,000 or euros. And a lot of people can't really buy speakers that price class. It makes a lot of sense, because that's like what a lot of people earn in a year, or sometimes they even earn a lot less than that in a year. But it's hard, man. It's hard finding a proper speaker that has everything. I feel that it's almost, when you're getting a speaker, it's almost like, okay, just pick your color, pick your priority, pick the type of thing that you like, instead of picking a thing that can just do everything, And that's what I felt when I got my speaker. And if I had to pick, if I couldn't pick my speaker and I had to keep it at a reasonable level and I had to find something used, I would still go for a Martin Design Bird 1, about $8,000 used. Or I would try to get a Martin Design Coltrane original one used. I could probably, if I was lucky, get that for like $20,000 if I was really lucky. Or I would get something like then I would get a Verity Sarastro 2 used for like $15,000. Those are like the speakers that I would go with, that are the closest thing to giving you all the stuff in the hi-fi world. So again, with the silver material, you just don't realize until you've done this experiment how much we're losing out on true warmth and true depth. The type of warmth that we're getting from copper materials that are a lot easier to produce, it's a very lower class of warmth, where it's a surface-like warmth that covers up the detail. When we're getting into pure silver, we're getting a deeper level of warmth that's more sophisticated. And you have to kind of mix it with some other metals for it to become more appealing, more sexy. But I think that we should go for silver plugs like VBT or the Audionote speaker terminals that they have. They're just ridiculously good. And Martin Design, they learned it. They used at least a couple of times. They used the VBT silver plugs, and it does a hell of a lot. Especially when you combine it with Yorma cables, and when you get custom made Aquatone units. It's like you're into a totally different level of sound. But yeah, like I said, you also don't want normal cables like this here. I remember my first do-it-yourself speaker, and it just had this stiff, horrible Supra cable in it, and it was horrible, absolutely horrible. I changed that cable to like something more like this, and it became, you know, clearly a bit better. But then again, I changed it to something like Carter's, and it just became a hell of a lot better. So yeah, I noticed that. I noticed that especially with the Verity speakers, that was one of the reasons why they were so damn good, because they had Nordøst's Odin in it. You know, Nordøst Odin sounds damn good, especially when you have it on Negra gear and other stuff like that. My God, does it just sound a hell of a lot better. But I also think that a lot of people can't appreciate the fact that more expensive speakers generally are much better, and they don't just because. Let me just read this again. I think that a lot of people can't appreciate the fact that more expensive speakers that generally are much better don't just have a special driver unit that sell, but yeah, that was kind of what I said before. I think it's the fact that they have custom made units. The really expensive speakers that we buy, they don't have the units that you have access to in the store. They have specially supplied units. And I've been in contact with several people that try to make these special do-it-yourself projects. And I can tell you that getting those custom-made units, my God, they are expensive. They usually cost 2 to 5 times more getting those units. So there is a reason for why those companies are so good, why they can create a sound that is so much better, because they just don't take stock items off the shelf. So and I think there's also a trick where a lot of speaker manufacturers do, that they make a cheap speaker that is big with a lot of units that just create a sense of ease, control, and power, but simply can't connect properly to the music. I think Tektron is a very good example of that. It's a very popular thing in America, where you just get these big cabinets, you get a lot of units, and then you just get this very easy, dynamic sound, and perhaps like with Tektron, you have a really good efficiency rating. So of course it makes it a lot easier for your amplifier to drive the sound, and it sounds probably like 10 times better than the speaker that you had before. But again, what happens when we put all of this stuff, into a speaker? We just have so much extra circuitry we have to deal with, and it just becomes annoying, because we're just listening to the effect part of the sound. We're not listening to the sincerity and the substance, and suddenly you don't even notice it, but you just gravitate slowly to music like Drake, Rihanna, Christine and the Queens, Dua Lipa, and all this crazy crap, which can to some degree, when you're a certain age, sound okay, but I mean, we can't all listen to disco tracks and rap and stuff like that. We also want to listen to proper music, listen to proper instruments, hear what a violin really sounds like. And we can't with a lot of these cheaper speakers, because they're just too much into the effect part of the sound, not giving us the true substance. And I think that we have to start thinking in the speaker world that less is more, so that we have fewer units, shorter signal, higher class components, and less exotic driver units that they have a tendency of dominating too much. So I think we should kind of go back, and I think I'll return to this a bit later in the text here, where I'll mention stuff like El Nico drivers and field coiled technology. But I would also like to see more speakers being made out of real wood that is not MDF, Um, I think it has a tendency, MDF, sounding a bit hollow and boosted at the same time. And I think that if we can get into proper wood, which is difficult, practically, because it's heavy, it's expensive to get, it's almost impossible to work with, and it can also be bad in a very different way if you can't use it properly. So I mean, you usually get proper wood when we're dealing with ultra expensive custom made speakers, but we want to keep it at a reasonable price range. So it's difficult. It's really difficult, and this is very important. I feel that there's no point in having speaker units that are less than 6 inches big in size, because it has a tendency of creating a sound that is just too fast, too edgy, unsettled, with not enough weight, and just separating itself too much from the other units. To me, it's kind of like a party trick that just messes with your brain and gets on your nerves for longer periods of time, because it just doesn't fully release. It just goes da 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 da. And I feel that also, again, when you go past drivers that are around 10 inches, that generally they just don't do a good enough job integrating with other units, so you just end up having like a 12-inch driver here, 15-inch, 18-inch driver there as a sub, and then you have your two-way system trying to integrate, and it just sounds wrong. It just doesn't integrate fully and give you a proper cool, I wouldn't say cool, proper authentic sound. So yeah, I think a lot of men have to get this out of their system, that they have to understand that going past 10 inches of driver units is just not sustainable. It just doesn't deliver good enough music. You have to keep it at like between 6 to 10 inches per driver. And I know a lot of people like listening to these 11, 12, 15, 18, 20-inch drivers, because they just have so much slam, weight, frequency response. I fully get that. And that is to some degree enormously cool, especially when you had like one big or two big units in a giant cabinet. That can create a lot of power, a lot of coolness. But for me, it's like, it's so crude, because you always get that dominating in the sound. So you end up with a lot of holes where the mid-range just doesn't play with the big unit, and then you have like a metallic cheap, I don't know, something that's cheaper than RAL, ribbon tweeter, and then you have like a poor filter on it that doesn't cost a lot, and it just doesn't work. And I think that they just do a better job on disappearing these units, that you don't hear it, that you just end up listening to the music instead. And we have to kind of be honest with ourselves and say that this is a cool party trick, when we have 12, 15, 18, 20-inch drivers. It gives us a lot of power, a lot of control, a lot of ease. A lot of people want that. I can fully understand that you want that coming from a very small speaker. But it isn't the way to really get into the good sound. I think a lot of people have to kind of, get past that, get that out of their system. And I think that we should, try and use more paper drivers and regular dome tweeters, and just become better at using components that are higher quality and have less of a signal. So here are like the negative sides of newer driver units. And I would say that many times it has an unnatural, plasticky, certain type of sound, going in like a metallic type of nature, where you don't get enough high, mid, and low end grunt and bite. I think that's especially one of the biggest problems I have with most ribbon tweeters, that a lot of those cheaper speakers that have such a small cabinet, such a bad filtering, so bad cables and terminals that you just don't get that bite. I think it. I've only heard it like in Verity Sarastro, where you finally got a bit of bite, and that's even though that it only has like a 6-inch driver, 6-inch midzone, and like a custom made ribbon tweeter. And when you can do that with so small units that don't cover that much surface area, then you know that you're dealing with a really good speaker. But a lot of ribbon tweeters, they just don't have that bite, especially in the top mid area. So it just becomes very polite and nice to listen to. So I think in a way we have to kind of go back and away from these exotic units, or do it like Verity and Martin Design do, where they just use a hell of a lot of time and money on doing it properly. So of course I have to mention the positive side, which is faster, more edgy, more highlighted in sound, just more clear, more crisp, more information, more bouncy, less added warmth, which can be good. I mean, Martin Design did that. They don't have any added warmth, and a lot of people would not like the sound on a normal system because there just isn't that added warmth and distortion that there is from a lot of other older speakers. So that's also why you need some really good gear with Martin Design speakers in generally. But I think that more speakers should go into the extreme area that we cannot hear. I'm talking about speaker units. So because it just seems like it affects the things that we can hear, the things that we can't hear. And I also noticed Paul from PS Audio saying this, that especially when you go into these high frequency speakers, that it does something. It does really something. And I noticed this was one of the reasons why I really like the Martin Bird 1 speaker and the Verity Sarastro speaker. It does something magical. It does something magical. And also, I would generally not recommend any speaker that doesn't go below 30 hertz. And a lot of two-way speakers, they don't even go below 40 hertz. So I think that's like a good reason for not picking a lot of bookshelf speakers, because they just don't give you the oomph, the bottom end, so it becomes very locked into the middle of the sound. So I think it also kind of gives you an impression of bandwidth, extra bandwidth, when we have these ultra frequency units. And I think that's like the only negative thing that I could say about the Audionote speakers, and I think that they could improve on that in the future, having a higher frequency with their speakers. I think they could improve on that in the future, probably like 10 or 20 years in the future. But they just need to do it so it really works at a proper level. And I don't feel that they're lacking anything, Audionote speakers, not at all. I just feel that there is a possibility of milking that they haven't fully done, and I think they're exploring that field coil technology, and that might do it. I'm not sure. So that's also very interesting, kind of going into that. And yeah, I also heard that Next Studio guy mentioned that the Alnico drivers were like really good from the olden days, and we don't really make them anymore, and I totally agree with them. We should go back to making more of those units, and like I said, field coil type of speaker units. I haven't heard field coil, speaker units yet, but I heard from a lot of people that it did a lot of good stuff. So that could be interesting. That could be really interesting into getting into the last level. And don't misunderstand me, but sometimes newer units are much better than in many ways compared to the best of the olden days. But we also have to understand that companies like Martin Design are only able to do this because they're custom made, so new units in themselves do not create a better sound. It's how they're usually custom made and implemented that do it. Sometimes you can get standard non-custom made units to sound pretty good, but you won't ever really get into that highest level of sound. It can still sound pretty good. And yeah. That was basically all I had to say in this this video here. It became a bit long, but I think you guys got it. There are still, some really good speakers out there, but I just think that, when you count the majority of thousands of speakers that are out there, then I think it's easy for me to say that, most speakers, it's just so easy to say most speakers are bad, because they are really bad. Just me personally, if I had to rate Dynaudio and Audio Vector and B&W, and I had to give like a percentage of what I think are good speakers that they make, I would say, this is just my opinion, but I would say that less than 1% of what they've produced is like really good. And I know that will probably hurt a lot of people, me saying that, but I also think that we shouldn't kid ourselves with listening to a lot of gear that just gives us a lot of cool effects that after a while gets old, and then you want a new speaker that does another cool effect. I think we have to kind of be a bit more honest to ourselves and realize that we want more speakers like the Audio Solutions Figaro XXL, the JBL L100, the Fenderstein 1CI and 2CE speakers. Those are ridiculously good speakers for the money, and would also be fun if you could buy like the DTQ WT do-it-yourself speaker. If there was like a company making that, wouldn't that be cool? I think that would be really cool. But yeah, I especially think that when we look at American speaker companies, they're just not fully getting it. They're cramming a lot of units into these big speakers, and they're putting these ridiculous prices on them, starting from like $50,000 going up to a couple of million. I think we're kind of doing this the wrong way around, it just doesn't work. I mean, just look at Wilson speakers. Wilson speakers in some regard are really cool, real informative, really awesome, especially with Spectral gear and Negra gear and D'Agostino gear and Griffin, stuff like that. It sounds like it has a lot of potential and it can do a lot of good, but it's still kind of broken in sound. It still can't, it still can't sound like fully released, fully natural. And for those prices, they should be able to do that. And I think that we can obviously do a hell of a lot more within the speaker area, even though we've done a lot the last 20, 30, 40 years or whatever you would say. So yeah, we can improve on our speakers a hell of a lot. it can get a lot better. And for some people, if they're really good, like my friend, if they have like the Monitor Audio PL300, and he got it for only like, I don't know what I wrote, it was $4,000 or $5,000 used. That's just an awesome speaker on the used market. And I think it's like, I don't know, $10,000 or $12,000 new, which is also ridiculously cheap. Fantastic value. More companies should follow in their steps and try to make a really good all-round speaker. But again, truth is very relative. If you had to listen to that speaker in a normal store on normal gear, you wouldn't notice that was a good speaker. So it kind of hides itself. You won't really notice it from the start that it's a really good speaker. But I did notice it listening to it at his place. So yeah, that's all I have to say in this video. Remember to like and subscribe. Bye.